Special thanks to His Majesty the King for kindly granting me access to the royal archives at Windsor Castle. Before we deal with the robbery itself, let's establish something about Glücksburg Castle and the family that owned it in 1945. The building itself is a famous water castle, built on a large pond in 1582 on the site of an abbey by the brother of King Friedrich II of Denmark, Johann, Duke of Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg. This area of Germany today once belonged to Denmark. Following Johann's death in 1622, the duchy was divided between his sons, and Glücksburg Castle went to his son Philip, known thereafter as Duke of Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg-Glücksburg. Bit of a mouthful. The family wasn't particularly important, though over the following 150 years it married into most of the significant noble families of the region on both sides of the border. The fifth Duke died in 1779 childless, and the castle and its lands were returned to the Danish crown. In 1825 the King of Denmark gave the castle and its estate to his brother-in-law, Friedrich Wilhelm of Holstein-Beck, who became Duke of Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg-Glücksburg. One of Friedrich's 10 children would eventually rule Denmark as King Christian IX. Christian married Princess Louisa of Hesse, and their 3 daughters were married into the royal houses of Britain and Russia. Alexandra married the Prince of Wales, later King Edward VII of Great Britain. Dagmar married Tsar Alexander III of Russia, and Tyra married Ernest Augustus, Crown Prince of Hanover and Duke of Cumberland. Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg-Glücksburg family were related to all of the royal families of Europe. The family relationship between that German-Danish house centered on Glücksburg Castle and the British royal family was well entrenched by 1945 due to multiple marriages between branches of both families. In 1864, Schleswig-Holstein passed into Prussian hands following a war with Denmark, and the palace remained in the Glücksburg family. The Kaiser's wife, Empress Augusta Victoria, regularly stayed at the castle due to her sister being married to the reigning duke. It was the Kaiser who had the Naval Academy at Mürwik constructed in 1907-10. And so it came to the Nazi period, and these close relations of the British royal family found themselves in an interesting situation. Many actively supported Hitler and joined the party or the SA or indeed the SS. When British troops arrived on the 23rd of May 1945 to extinguish the Dönitz-Rump government, the castle was acting as a sort of royal refugee camp, cram full of German royals, many of whom, owing to the fact the current British royal house is German, held or had held British royal titles as well as their German ones. Most notably at the castle was the current Duke. He was a great-grandson of Queen Victoria, and therefore a cousin of King George VI. Because the British expected, as I mentioned in episode 1, to find senior Nazis like Heinrich Himmler at the castle, the units that were sent to deal with this situation were interesting. The published literature says that the Cheshire's anti-tank platoon, under the command of Lieutenant F.B. Walker, was the main unit involved, and that this platoon set up its 6-pounder guns to cover the castle, before part of the platoon under Walker stormed the castle across its drawbridge. This is partly true, but the person actually in charge of the operation at Glücksburg wasn't a member of the Cheshire Regiment. It was South African Major Geoffrey Gordon Creed. Gordon Creed is an interesting and controversial character. They say he actually inspired Ian Fleming's character James Bond. A dashing cavalry officer, highly decorated, Distinguished Service Order and Military Cross for some amazing commando operations in World War II, particularly in Greece, and was a member of the SAS, the famous Special Air Service Regiment, and also SOE, Special Operations Executive. By 1945, he was head of counterintelligence in Germany, so you can see just how high-profile the Glücksburg job was. However, Gordon Creed's stellar reputation was to receive quite a hit following his involvement in the Glücksburg affair. Accompanying the Cheshire's anti-tank platoon for the operation was No. 65 Field Security Section from MI 11, and also a detachment of the 1st SAS, in this case made up of Belgian Special Forces soldiers. The inclusion of an SAS element in the operation may have been due to Gordon Creed having been SAS himself. It may also be due to the suspected presence in the castle of top wanted Nazis. After all, the men that eventually would find and arrest former Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop in Hamburg on the 14th of June 1945 were from the French SAS. The SAS was being used to find such wanted men. Among the many German royals at the castle was one particular person who would cause a lot of problems in the future. Her Royal Highness the Grand Duchess of Mecklenburg was a member of the British royal family. Her father, the Crown Prince of Hanover, had been until 1917, when King George V stripped his German relatives of their British titles, Duke of Cumberland and a Prince of Great Britain and Ireland. Therefore, the Grand Duchess of Mecklenburg was also by descent a Princess of Great Britain and Ireland. However, the Mecklenburg's elder son felt no such attachment to Britain, having spent World War II serving in Himmler's Waffen-SS. Another of the royals was technically a neutral citizen. The Princess of Schaumburg-Lippe, Princess Feodora, was by birth a Danish princess, her uncle being King Christian X, and of course Denmark was an allied nation during World War II. Many of these German royal families had sought sanctuary with the Duke of Schleswig-Holstein and had been granted rooms in Glücksburg Castle. Due to having been evacuated from other parts of Germany, the royals had with them some of their most portable and mobile wealth, their jewels and other valuables that they'd been able to pack into suitcases and special boxes to travel to the castle with, most of it of the finest quality, and many family pieces passed down in royal circles, some of them originating with the kingdoms of Hanover and Great Britain, and also with the Tsars of Russia and the Kingdom of Denmark. The royals were given a special area of the castle in which they lived, while the rest of the building was given over to Minister Speer's personal accommodation and that of his staff, and also officers. The royals themselves had no protection and no guards, and had sought the safety and protection of the Dönitz-Rump government. The operation to clear the castle commenced around 10 o'clock in the morning on the 23rd of May 1945, the building having been quietly surrounded by the guns of the Cheshire's anti-tank platoon. The only way into and out of the castle was via the drawbridge, and Major Gordon Creed and his men met no resistance whatsoever on entering the castle. They were all heavily armed, ready to use lethal force against any resistance they encountered, and the soldiers quickly sped through the huge building, ostensibly searching for Himmler, von Ribbentrop, and perhaps also the traitor William Joyce. Surprise was key. They didn't want any of the top Nazis that could have been there to have ended their lives before being apprehended. Within a few minutes, the search revealed one such big fish. Albert Speer was found shaving in a side cubicle off of his bedroom and somewhat politely taken prisoner. I was recently shown this letter when I was visiting Dönitz's baton that was written by Speer in the 1970s to the 1st Battalion, the Herefordshire Regiment, thanking them for the courtesy and kindness shown to him by the sergeant who took him prisoner. This adds another dimension to the story and suggests that members of the Herefords also took part in the storming of Glücksburg Castle, a fact that has not been noted officially on any report that I've come across. Be that as it may, the Cheshires, the Field Security Section, and the SAS Section began to move Speer's staff outside of the castle into the courtyard to be searched and catalogued, whilst also grabbing whatever documents were of interest. The soldiers next searched the area of the castle that housed the German royals and their staff. Initially, an officer of the Cheshire Regiment, presumably Lieutenant Walker, who was the senior officer present, informed the Grand Duke of Mecklenburg and others that they could stay in their rooms whilst the search continued, which was presumably being made for hidden Nazis and/or weapons. But within a few minutes the attitude changed and, quote, "arms ready," noted the Duchess of Mecklenburg, "forced us to leave our rooms immediately," end quote. The royals were herded at gunpoint into the castle courtyard, where they were watched over by sentries armed with Sten submachine guns, and they would witness many things of no military value being removed from the castle and placed inside waiting British army trucks or the captured vehicles of Speer's ministry. The royals all gave extensive statements to the British investigatory authorities detailing what they witnessed. Danish Princess Theodora of Schaumburg-Lippe, when confronted in her room by a soldier, the princess showed him her identity card telling him that she was born a princess of Denmark. Quote, "Nevertheless, I was ordered out into the hall on the first floor, where I and my husband were placed in custody by armed soldiers." End quote. Once in the courtyard, the princess saw what was really going on. Quote, "While I was there, I recognized personally several articles belonging to us. Among other things, a light handbag of hog leather and a telescope with the initials of Prince Gustav of Denmark engraved on the case, all being taken away by the soldiers." End quote. Others in the courtyard witnessed the same looting. They soon realized that the British were plundering the castle. One princess, Caroline of Reuss, remained in her room as she was ill and observed what was happening inside the castle, the only non-British witness. Given permission to remain on her bed by a British officer due to her health, he even apologized for the disturbance. Quote, "By and by, many British soldiers," she recalled, "passed my room, went about in the room, and when they observed that the room was still used, they went out again. A British soldier took my wristwatch out of my jewel case. When I drew his attention to the fact that the watch belonged to me, he put it back and went out." End quote. However, in the unoccupied rooms, British soldiers were turning them over with the alacrity of professional housebreakers, each armed not only with weapons, but with little sacks to carry their loot. The fact that the witnesses saw these little sacks, presumably empty Hessian sandbags or similar, suggests an element of pre-planning, as if they had come prepared to loot. Princess Caroline's room was adjacent to the quarters of Prince Christian of Schaumburg-Lippe and his family, now down in the courtyard. Quote, "I heard the drawing out of wardrobes and drawers," recalled Princess Caroline, "as well as the raking over of things." End quote. Caroline was eventually ordered outside as well, where she reported what she had seen and heard to her companions. Princess Anastasia of Schleswig-Holstein saw how prepared British soldiers were from her position in the castle courtyard. Quote, "Here we could observe the British soldiers were entering the castle with small empty bags, left the place again with filled bags, and packed these bags into a lorry. We observed at this opportunity that a yellow leather suitcase of the Prince Christian of Schaumburg-Lippe was carried out of the castle and put in a German passenger car of the staff Speer. All entreaties of the Prince Christian, who had observed this event, to keep his case were in vain." End quote. Major Gordon Creed was confronted by many of the royals, but he replied that, quote, "he could not give back any things in front of the members of the staff Speer," end quote, which is an odd reply. Hereditary Grand Duchess Karin of Mecklenburg went back to her room to fetch her identity card and was robbed of her camera by 2 British soldiers who took it out of her hands. Cameras in particular were taken whenever they appeared, and perhaps the British did not want any photographic evidence of their activities inside the castle that day. The affidavits submitted by the royals concerning the time they spent under guard out in the courtyard are all pretty much in agreement. They all report both the recognizing of pieces of their luggage or objects being taken from their quarters to waiting vehicles by British soldiers, and added that most of the soldiers carried small empty sacks or bags into the castle and returned with these stuffed full, loading them aboard the transport as well, and also dropping pieces of jewellery and other stolen items in the courtyard as they went. After some time, the royals were allowed, presumably on the orders of Major Gordon Creed, to return to their rooms, where they discovered the full extent of the looting. Princess Hermina of Reuss observed, quote, "The jewels of the ducal family of Mecklenburg were in the wardrobe of my sleeping room. This wardrobe was open, a British soldier was standing in the wardrobe and was busy on opening jewel cases. Later I found out that our trunks were raked over and there were missing 300 Reichsmarks, 30 pairs of stockings, 2 valuable cigarette cases and utensils." End quote. When Princess Anastasia of Schleswig-Holstein entered her room, she, quote, "met 2 British soldiers, which seemed to be surprised, got embarrassed and left the room quickly. In the room were missing all open, standing watches, fountain pens and some valuable utensils. Wardrobes and drawers were opened and searched through. In the adjoining room we found a soldier in a wardrobe where the jewels of our family were locked up. He was surprised just when he was going to break open a jewel case. The other cases and trunks were mostly already broken up. As the soldier had his pockets fully packed and refused my father, the Grand Duke, to give back the stolen things, I fetched a British officer, who likewise also uttered he would not order the soldier to give the things back. My father demanded then that at least on the castle yard an examination should be made at once. This was also declined by the officer, with the reason that it would not be possible to search British soldiers in the presence of German officers of the Staff Speer. The officer belonged to the Cheshire Regiment." End quote. Grand Duchess Karin of Mecklenburg discovered much the same scene. Quote, "When I came back to my room, I found out that my green jewel case with contents, as well as the jewels of my husband, were stolen. My jewels were later found with a case in the cellar apart. 2 rings were laying in the lower hall of the castle, apparently thrown away by the doer." End quote. The Grand Duchess of Mecklenburg's maid also noted that a red bag containing jewels and about 10,000 Reichsmarks in cash was missing. The looters were obviously equal opportunity thieves because they also stole the maid's property as well. The male members of the party stated that they approached Major Gordon Creed several times to try and have their property returned to them, but to no avail, including confronting British soldiers in front of Major Creed who were obviously carrying stolen goods. So how much was stolen? On screen are some of the lists compiled by the various affected royals, listing their jewels that were stolen. The lists are detailed and based on previous inventories. Among the items were jewellery that once belonged to the British, Danish, Russian and Hanoverian royal families, plus newer pieces commissioned by the current owners. Grand Duchess Alexandria of Mecklenburg would submit a claim against the British authorities of 511,680 Reichsmarks, which at today's prices is around £3.5 million. Princess Feodora of Schaumburg-Lippe claims 68,000 Reichsmarks, or today's prices about £476,000. Several other large claims would be filed, meaning that at today's prices, and judging by how many royals were actually in the castle, the Glücksburg heist must have totaled multiple millions of pounds. But the British soldiers had made a big mistake. The people they had robbed were not just ordinary Germans, but very well-connected members of the International Union of Royalty. And most unfortunate, some of them were on first-name terms with the Commander-in-Chief of the British Army, King George VI himself. With the committing of pen to paper, some of these German royals would trigger a storm of controversy and aggravation that would echo for years, from Glücksburg to Buckingham Palace to 10 Downing Street via Scotland Yard. Tune in next time as the Army and the Metropolitan Police begin the hunt for the looters and their loot, urged on by the King himself. Will the soldiers get away with daylight robbery? Find out next time. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.